Chapter 225. After Chu Luiwei won this round, the situation in the arena immediately changed. The remaining few people looked at her from time to time with different expressions, but they were obviously more serious. They thought that Chu Luiwei would be at the bottom of the last 10 people, but who knew that she would defeat Sidu Ziyue and take first place? This time they had to reevaluate Chu Luiwei. Previously, when she was a Stage 1 warrior, she defeated 2 Stage 4 warriors consecutively. After breaking through to Stage 2, she even defeated a Stage 4 warrior. This result was enough to make Chu Luiwei famous. If they wanted to take first place, they had to surpass Chu Luiwei. Sun Zhongyan looked at a young man from Nanfeng Academy. Yi Chenjia, it's your turn to choose. Yi Chenjia was ranked 9th in front of Chu Luiwei. According to the rules, it was his turn to choose one of the top 5 to challenge. Yi Chenjia seemed to be prepared. He went up the stage and cupped his hands at a young man from Tai Yin Academy. Nanfeng Academy's Yi Chenjia challenges Tai Yin Academy's Su Tingfeng. Seeing him make such a choice, everyone nodded subconsciously. Clearly, they felt that it was within their expectations. Su Tingfeng was ranked 5th. It was obvious that he was the easiest to challenge among the top 5. Yi Chenjia choosing him was the safest choice. Su Tingfeng laughed heartily, and with a leap he jumped onto the arena. Please. Seeing the two of them fighting, some people started discussing in private. I was scared to death. I thought that all the new students this year were so powerful. It's enough to have Chu Luiwei. Otherwise, we won't be able to survive. Actually, I heard that Yi Chenjia is only 16 years old this year, but he's already a Stage 3 warrior. He should be the top among the new students. It's his first time participating in the Qingjiao competition this year, but he directly entered the top 10. He's not inferior to Jianghu at all. It's a pity that Chu Luiwei appeared in front of him, overshadowing the others. I think that even if Chu Luiwei isn't the top warrior this year, she will still be famous. Her future is limitless. With the intense battle between Chu Luiwei and Sidu Ziyue as a comparison, the battle between Su Tingfeng and Yi Chenjia seemed much more ordinary. Although Yi Chenjia was talented, there was a gap between him and Su Tingfeng. After a tough battle for half an hour, he lost regretfully. Su Tingfeng cupped his hands at Yi Chenjia politely. You let me win. Yi Chenjia chuckled bitterly. It's indeed not easy. I wonder. He couldn't help but look at Tian's side, to the end, to the stage, to the stage, to the stage. The surrounding people were still discussing her battle in low voices, but there wasn't the slightest bit of pride in her eyes, as if she wasn't the one who had won, was to the top to two. Top to the stage to the end. Yi Chenjia was ashamed of his inferiority. Su Tingfeng followed his gaze, and his expression changed slightly. He rubbed his glabella with a slight headache. Originally, he thought that his ranking could be higher, but it seemed like it would be difficult. The next 2 matches were very fast. In the third match, Tianlu Academy's Qin Huai challenged Nanfeng Academy's Shi Wanwan. In the fourth match, Nanfeng Academy's Li Ziyuan challenged Xiao Wenling from the same academy. The 3 people after Chu Luiwei all tried their best to challenge people with lower rankings, but they still failed. Chu Luiwei watched seriously as she adjusted her breathing. She couldn't tell who would become her opponent later on, so she had to take this chance to observe their abilities. Both Shi Wanwan and Xiao Wenling were intermediate Stage 4 warriors. Judging from the competition, they weren't as good as Sidu Ziyue. This also meant that they couldn't threaten her for the time being. She turned her gaze and looked at Rong Jin. Rong Jin, who was in second place, became the last person to be chosen. His opponent was Tai Yin Academy's Huan Jingxue. Huan Jingxue was in 6th place, and he was already an intermediate Stage 4 warrior. If it were the previous Shi Wanwan or Xiao Wenling, they might have a chance of winning. However, Rong Jin was a peak Stage 4 warrior, and he was stronger. His chances of winning weren't high. The two of them stood in the arena and faced each other. Both of them were tall and had handsome appearances. Just by standing there, they attracted the attention of many women. I didn't have the chance to fight you last year, and I've always regretted it. This time, it's finally perfect. Huan Jingxue chuckled. Please give me your guidance. Rong Jin nodded proudly. It's not guidance, it's just a friendly match. Although he said this, he didn't take Huan Jingchua seriously. There was a difference in abilities between the two of them. Rong Jin had seen Huan Jingchua's previous matches, and he could only be considered average. Rong Jin was aiming for first place in the warrior competition. After he defeated Huan Jingchua, he might have to challenge Chu Luiwei. Thinking of this, he felt frustrated. Let's begin. Huan Jingchua looked at Rong Jin's absent-minded appearance and smiled deeply. Please. Then he made the first move. The moment he moved, his figure disappeared from the spot. Rong Jin suddenly recovered his senses and immediately knitted his brows. How did Heng Jingchua's speed suddenly become so fast? A cold wind came from behind, and Rong Jin immediately changed his direction and threw out a palm strike. Lingyun palm. The wind from his palm whistled. Just as it was about to hit Huan Jingchua's chest, he somehow moved and dodged it again. Rong Jin's palm strike missed. Looking at the smiling Huan Jingchua in the other direction, Rong Jin's heart slowly sank. This Huan Jingchua is not right. Chu Luiwei, who was sitting below the stage and watching the match, suddenly sat up straight. His gaze focused as he stared at Huan Jingchua. Si Yang noticed her interest and couldn't help but ask softly, "You also think that there's something wrong with Huan Jingchua?" Even though he didn't like Rong Jin's abilities were widely acknowledged. But now, Huan Jingchua easily dodged Rong Jin's attack. Chu Luiwei was silent for a moment and said, "He's an advanced stage 4 warrior." Yes, everyone knows that he's... Wait, you mean Huan Jingchua? Si Yang was shocked and couldn't help but take a few more glances. That's impossible, right? His aura is clearly similar to Jianghu's. Isn't he an intermediate stage 4 warrior? Chu Luiwei didn't explain, but her expression became more serious. Si Yang wanted to say something, but he suddenly felt Huan Jingchua's aura skyrocket. In just a moment, his aura wasn't any weaker than Rong Jin's. The two of them went from being one strong and one weak to being evenly matched. Chu Luiwei narrowed her eyes. This Huan Jingchua will be a strong opponent for me. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 226. Gasps could be heard from the crowd. Peak Stage 4 Warrior? So this is Heng Jingchua's true ability? I really couldn't tell how he suppressed his cultivation level previously. I heard that some secret techniques or yuan instruments can hide one's abilities. This is going to be interesting. A battle between two peak stage 4 warriors. I thought he was the unluckiest one and could only challenge Rong Jin, but it's still unknown who will win now. The chaotic discussions entered Rong Jin's ears, and his face turned even uglier. After such a long time, I didn't even realize that Heng Jingchua was hiding his abilities. Now that I think about what Heng Jingchua said, it's ridiculous. Advice? He's clearly at the same level as me, but he said that on purpose. I didn't expect you to improve so quickly in a year. He remembered that Heng Jingchua was only a beginner stage 4 warrior last year. He actually broke through to peak stage 4 warrior in such a short time. No wonder the crowd was shocked. Heng Jingchua's smile deepened. I was just lucky. I just broke through a few days ago. Rong Jin felt even more uncomfortable when he heard this. It took him almost 2 years to break through from beginner stage 4 warrior to peak stage 4 warrior. Heng Jingchua was clearly showing off. Since that's the case, let's cut the crap and see who's stronger. Rong Jin didn't want to listen to him anymore, so he circulated his force and attacked first. He only used 70% of his strength in the previous attack, but this time, he used all his strength. Heng Jingchua faced it head-on. The two of them fought hand-to-hand. The battle quickly became a mess. Even though the two of them were at the same level, Rong Jin had broken through earlier and was stronger, so he would definitely have the upper hand. But as time passed, the crowd realized that this wasn't the case. Heng Jingchua calmly received all of Rong Jin's attacks and even seemed to be handling them with ease. On the other hand, Rong Jin gradually realized that Heng Jingchua was stronger than he thought after his consecutive losses. He originally thought that he would win this round, but it ended in a stalemate. Rong Jin's heart gradually became anxious. Looking at the situation in the arena, Sun Zhongyan gradually frowned. I remember that Heng Jingchua wasn't the best before, right? How did he improve so much in just a year? Wen Yan nodded. You're right. The reason why this person was ranked 6th was actually because he was lucky in the previous year's competition. He didn't meet any particularly strong opponents. At that time, it seemed that he was just fighting steadily and steadily. As for other things, he didn't seem to be particularly outstanding. I don't know what happened this year. Sun Zhongyan stroked his beard. Perhaps he encountered some kind of opportunity. Who knows? Wen Yan and the rest exchanged glances and saw the worry in each other's eyes. What they were most concerned about wasn't why Heng Jingchua suddenly became stronger in the past year, but whether Rong Jin could win this round. He was publicly acknowledged as one of the strongest students in Tianlu Academy. They all hoped that he would be able to get first place in the Qingjiao competition. As for himself, it was clear that he had the same thoughts. But if he lost this round, he would fall to the bottom 5. Then, the best result he could achieve was only 6th place. This wasn't even as good as his 5th place last year. It was fine if other people lost, but if Rong Jin lost, the entire academy would lose face. Bai Chen rolled his eyes and smiled. Elder son, actually, we don't have to worry too much. No matter what, we still have little Lu Yu. I'm first now. As long as I can stabilize this position in the future, it will definitely be a great honor. Sun Zhongyan wanted to say something but stopped. Actually, he was still worried. This Heng Jingchua seems to be holding back. Unlike the stifling atmosphere at Tianlu Academy, the crowd at Taiyin Academy finally regained their spirits. Cheng Han smiled in surprise. This kid hit it well. Even I didn't know that he had already broken through to become a peak stage 4 warrior. Situ Xingchen had already calmed down, so she smiled and said, Master is always busy. It's normal that he didn't notice such small things. Even though Cheng Han was the director, there were many things that he didn't personally ask about. Most of his energy was actually placed on Situ Xingchen. If not, he wouldn't have the idea of letting Situ Xingchen become the top celestial physician in her first Qingjiao competition. No matter what, this kid looks like he's a talent that can be nurtured. When the Qingjiao competition ends, we have to nurture him well. The few teachers behind him nodded when they heard this. You're right, Director. Cheng Han looked at the stage in satisfaction. How shrewd was his judgment. He could tell with one look that Rong Jin was gradually at a disadvantage. As long as nothing happened to Heng Jingchua, it was only a matter of time before he won. Even though they lost Situ Ziyue, they still had Heng Jingchua. I really want to see if Tianlu Academy's people can still be so smug when Rong Jin loses. Many wounds gradually appeared on Rong Jin's body. Even though they weren't serious, the blood stains on his clothes made him look especially pathetic. However, Heng Jingchua still looked like he was at ease. The contrast between the two was really stark. The crowd's voices gradually became softer as they watched this scene nervously. Heng Jingchua suddenly closed in. Rong Jin was shocked and immediately retreated. However, he was injured, so how could he be faster than Heng Jingchua? The distance between the two kept shrinking. Heng Jingchua finally struck out again. Rong Jin couldn't avoid it and could only brace himself to receive it. A punch flew out. Hong. The two of them crazily attacked each other. The messy ripples spread in all directions. At this point, Rong Jin suddenly felt that something was amiss. A chill was spreading from Heng Jingchua's palm to his hand. At the same time, the force in his body suddenly became messy and started to drain rapidly. His heart skipped a beat, and he immediately looked up. Heng Jingchua's move was very strange. It's time to end this. Heng Jingchua met his gaze and didn't avoid it. Instead, he smiled meaningfully. His voice, which had originally sounded modest and courteous, was now filled with coldness. Not good, Rong Jin thought. He immediately wanted to retreat. However, Heng Jingchua was faster. His palm turned into a claw and directly grabbed Rong Jin's wrist. The strength in his hand was frightening. This time, Rong Jin's wrist was instantly bruised. How dare you? Before Rong Jin could finish his sentence, Heng Jingchua had already grabbed his wrist and harshly flung it out. The crowd only saw Rong Jin's figure uncontrollably fly out. Then, he fell to the ground with a bang. The key was that he fell outside the competition venue. Out of bounds, he was eliminated. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 227. There was an uproar. Nobody expected Rong Jin to be eliminated in such a manner. At this point, Sidu Ziyue and Rong Jin, who had the highest hopes for this year's Qingjiao competition, had both been defeated. Rong Jin finally recovered his senses when he heard the commotion around him and realized that he had been pushed out of the arena. I lost. Rong Jin's mind went blank. He never thought that he would lose to Heng Jingshua. He also didn't think that he would fall behind the top 5. This failure directly determined that he had no hope of surpassing last year's ranking. He supported himself with his arms and wanted to stand up, but he realized that he had no force in his body. He looked up in shock and saw that Heng Jingshua had regained his gentle and harmless smile. "Thank you for letting me win, Crown Prince Rong Jin." Even though he was smiling, he stood there high and mighty. His eyes and brows were filled with mockery. It was as if he was saying, "You're just a so-so." Rong Jin's heart burned like fire, causing him to lose his rationality. Once he opened his mouth, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground again. His organs seemed to be enveloped by the cold air, which gradually spread to his entire body. His body gradually stiffened, and his mind became muddled. Finally, his vision turned black, and he fainted. "Go and bring him back." Sun Zhongyan immediately frowned and said. Very quickly, someone went forward and helped Rong Jin up. Realizing that he had fainted, Sun Zhongyan hurriedly went forward and carefully looked at his face. His brows furrowed even more tightly. Even though he expected Heng Jingshua to win, it didn't seem to be enough to make Rong Jin faint. However, there didn't seem to be anything wrong with Rong Jin. He glanced at Heng Jingshua, but saw that the man had already left. His expression was the same as usual. "Xiansong, come and take a look." Xiansong went forward and took Rong Jin's pulse. After checking carefully, he shook his head. He was depressed previously, and he fainted because of the blow today. "It's nothing serious." The crowd looked at each other and was speechless. They had actually heard a little about Rong Jin being grounded by His Majesty. He could only come out because of the Qingjiao competition. He wanted to use this to make a comeback, but he didn't expect that this series of events would break him down. Sun Zhongyan nodded, feeling slightly relieved. "That's good. Bring him back first and let Zhuorong take care of him." Xiansong hesitated. If that's the case, wouldn't it be the same as giving up on the competition later on? How can he fight in his current state? Besides, what's the point of continuing the competition? Sun Zhongyan sighed. As the crown prince, Rong Jin was used to being arrogant. This time, he was aiming for first place. Now, not to mention first place, he was not even fated to be in the top 5. If he continued to force himself to compete, it would just be a waste of time. Bai Chen coughed and whispered, "That's right." Then wouldn't Sidu Ziyue be unable to continue competing? Although Tai Yen Academy did not say anything, it was obvious that Sidu Ziyue would not participate in the competition. As such, both sides were in a similar situation, so it wasn't too bad. Xiansong and the others didn't say anything else. Just like that, Rong Jin was quickly taken away. When she passed by Chu Luiyue, she fixed her gaze on him. That was not right. Even though Rong Jin was narrow-minded, he was capable. Heng Jingshua was of the same cultivation level as him, so how could he directly knock Rong Jin out? "Lu Yu, what are you looking at?" The golden mane bear cub ran out of Mu Hongyu's arms, and Mu Hongyu hurriedly chased after it. She saw that the older Chu Luiyue was staring in the direction that Rong Jin left in. She widened her eyes and asked in disbelief, "Are you worried about Rong Jin?" Chu Luiyue looked at her speechlessly. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm just worried about myself." Rong Jin's behavior was really strange. There must be something wrong with that Heng Jingshua. Mu Hongyu patted her chest. "I thought so too. You're not blind. But then again, I think that Heng Jingshua is quite strong. If the two of you fight later, can you win?" Chu Luiyue retracted his gaze. "We'll have to try to find out." After the first round of competition, The new rankings were out. Chu Luiwei was temporarily in first place, followed by Heng Jingchua, Xiao Wenling, Shi Wanwan, and Su Tingfeng. Sun Zhongyan asked in a low voice, "The first round is over, and the rankings are out. If anyone is not satisfied with their current ranking, they can continue to challenge us. If no one challenges them, their current ranking will be the final result of the Qingjiao competition." He looked around and swept his gaze across Chu Luiwei and the others. "Now, whoever wants to challenge us, step forward." The entire square was silent. Everyone looked at the few people curiously, secretly guessing who would continue to compete. At this stage, no matter who competed with whom, it would be a bloodbath. However, the glory of being first was something that everyone yearned for. Chu Luiwei was the center of attention. Without a doubt, her position was the most tempting. Finally, someone took a step forward and stood out. Chu Luiwei seemed to sense something. She looked up and saw a smiling face. Even though that face was smiling, there was no hint of a smile in the corners of his eyes. There was only a restless ambition. Taiyan Academy's Heng Jingchua challenges Tianlu Academy's Chu Luiwei. Chapter 228. As expected, Heng Jingchua stood out and went for the first place. In an instant, almost everyone became excited. These two people were definitely the most eye-catching people in this Qingjiao competition. Chu Luiwei was young, but her fighting skills were shocking. It was easy for her to win against someone of a higher level. Heng Jingchua had improved so quickly that he was not to be underestimated. Everyone was curious about who would have the last laugh when the two of them met. Under countless gazes, Chu Luiwei stood up, smiled, and nodded. "Please. I didn't expect it to be the two of us fighting in the end." Heng Jingchua cupped his hands and smiled. Chu Luiwei seemed to smile. "You should have expected this, right?" Heng Jingchua's smile froze for a moment, but it quickly disappeared. "Miss Chu, you really know how to joke. Everyone wants to win in the Qingjiao competition. However, I didn't expect to enter the finals. I also didn't expect my final opponent to be you." Chu Luiwei could not be bothered to listen to him. Heng Jingchua obviously came prepared. He purposely hid his abilities previously and only showed his true abilities when he fought with Rong Jin. She was almost certain that he had other tricks up his sleeves. "Cut the crap. Let's begin," said Chu Luiwei as she took out the black Xian formation crystal. Heng Jingchua's eyelids twitched. Chu Luiwei's move was indeed difficult to deal with. "Isn't it bad for little Lu Yu to use her killer move the moment she goes up?" asked Bai Chen worriedly. Sun Zhongyan smiled helplessly. "What else can she do? Heng Jingchua is an advanced stage 4 warrior after all." The difference between the two of them was huge. If Chu Luiwei did not give it her all from the start, this match would end very quickly. By then, she would not even have the chance to use her killer move. However, she used too much energy just now. She definitely hasn't recovered yet. It's already very impressive that she won against Situ Ziyue. Even if she loses this match, she'll be second. Besides, she's not a warrior in the academy. As long as she does her best, she won't have any regrets. Bai Chen thought about it and didn't say anything else. Buddhist Lotus Formation. With Chu Luiwei's clear shout, the first layer of petals slowly bloomed. Immediately after, the second level quickly appeared. The huge Buddhist lotus appeared once again. A powerful pressure silently spread out. Chu Luiwei had used the Buddhist lotus formation twice in a row, but he had almost exhausted all of his strength. However, the power of a level 4 Xian formation was enough to deal with someone at the peak of the 4th stage. As long as he could kill Heng Jingchua with one strike, he would be able to win. Heng Jingchua looked at the Buddhist lotus that was slowly blooming and his expression turned serious. He clasped his hands slightly in front of him, and streams of origin power rapidly condensed. A round ball as bright as the moon gradually appeared in his palm. The sphere looked bright and hot, but in reality, it was bone-chilling cold. Streaks of white mist condensed and shrouded the surroundings. Even Heng Jingchua's hands were covered in a thin layer of frost. Both of them were accumulating their power. Then Heng Jingchua made the first move and threw the sphere in his hand forward. Moon Devour. The sphere quickly flew towards Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue activated the origin power in his body. Close. The huge petals swayed gently and then closed. Just like when he was fighting with Sidu Ziyue, Heng Jingshua's sphere gradually slowed down and finally fell into the Buddhist lotus formation, completely covered by the layers of petals. In the arena, only two violent forces were left fighting each other. Although the crowd couldn't see what was happening inside, they could still feel the vibrations coming from the trembling petals. Can Chu Luiyue still win this time? The Buddhist lotus formation has swallowed Heng Jingshua's power again. I don't think it's that simple. Chu Luiyue has already fought once, and now he doesn't have much energy left. The power of the Buddhist lotus formation must have weakened as well. Heng Jingchua is the same. If the Buddhist lotus formation can't stop Heng Jingchua, then Chu Luiyue will lose for sure. Chu Luiyue stared at the cluster of Buddhist lotuses. She could clearly feel that the moon devourer's power was being dissolved by the Buddhist lotus formation. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before Heng Jingchua, bang. Suddenly, a soft sound came from the Buddhist lotus formation. The sound couldn't be heard clearly by others, but it immediately alerted Chu Luiyue. On one of the petals, there was a hole that was about an inch long. The reason why there was the sound of something breaking was because there was a layer of frost on the petal. As it was inside, and it was only a small area, Chu Luiyue didn't notice it previously. The layer of frost made the petal extremely weak, and it was easily broken by a force that flew out. Chu Luiyue looked carefully and suddenly realized that there was a faint black color on the edge of the broken petal. Something was wrong. Chu Luiyue was alarmed, and she felt a strong sense of uneasiness. She didn't think and immediately retreated. At the same time, she waved her wrist and threw out the crystal barrier. The transparent barrier instantly enveloped her. Almost at the same time, countless similar holes appeared on the huge Buddhist lotus. Then, the Buddhist lotus suddenly broke. Countless rays of light scattered in all directions. A violent aura swept out in all directions. The round ball reappeared in everyone's sight. Compared to the beginning, it looked smaller, but its power was still there. When the Buddhist lotus broke, it quickly flew toward Chu Luiyue. The crowd exclaimed, "Chu Luiyue's Buddhist lotus formation has been broken." This time, Heng Jingchua is definitely going to win. The difference in strength is indeed difficult to overcome. Looking at the situation, Cheng Han's lips curled up. Jingchua's abilities have indeed improved a lot. He can even break through a 4th-level Xian formation. Xingchen, even though your brother is injured, now that Jingchua has stepped in and won first place, it can be considered as helping Ziyue and the entire academy regain face. Situ Xingchen nodded. I wonder if Heng Jingchua can deal with Chu Luiyue like how he dealt with Rong Jin. In this competition, nobody was allowed to kill, but it was still possible to injure someone severely. Since Heng Jingchua wants to be first, he must have used all his strength against Chu Luiyue. Thinking of this, Situ Xingchen finally felt a little better. As for the crystal barrier, it won't be too late to ask about it after all this is over. Chu Luiyue looked up at the round, moon-like ball that was rapidly approaching her. The tyrannical power struck the glazed barrier, causing it to retreat. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly jumped. Even if the crystal barrier can protect me, I'll still fail if I go out like this. She made up her mind and suddenly jumped out of the crystal barrier. She wanted to avoid that attack. However, at this moment, she suddenly saw that within the sphere, there seemed to be a faintly discernible mass of black. The sinister and cold aura made one shudder. Her heart skipped a beat. Heng Jingchua actually, mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 229. Just as Chu Luiyue was about to speak, Heng Jingchua seemed to have sensed something. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and he quickly rushed toward Chu Luiyue. He was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he was in front of Chu Luiyue. Without hesitation, he shot out another ray of force. The force merged with the ball, and the power that had been reduced increased again. It also approached Chu Luiyue at an even faster speed. A terrifying pressure came crushing over. Chu Luiwei felt as if her chest was being crushed by a huge rock. Even breathing became difficult, let alone speaking. Her face became even paler. She was about to be hit by the moon devourer. It's over. Chu Luiwei is going to lose. Why did she suddenly come out of the crystal barrier? If she's hiding inside, she can't just stay inside. Heng Jingchua is so strong. He can definitely push her and the crystal barrier out of the arena. But this time, she really can't turn the situation around. Almost everyone was watching this scene nervously. Some were already shaking their heads in pity, as if they had already predicted the final outcome. However, at this moment, a red figure suddenly appeared in front of Chu Luiwei. Chu Luiwei felt an itch on her cheek. She looked over and realized that the blood ferret had come out, and it was blocking in front of her. Dumpling, come back. Chu Luiwei was anxious. She gritted her teeth and shouted. Blood was already flowing out of the corner of her mouth. If she could rush to the front at this time, she would be able to see that Tuanzi's eyes were burning with anger. Its fur was already standing up, and it was obviously going to rush forward. Heng Jingchua narrowed his eyes and looked at the red furry thing that suddenly appeared in front of him. Blood ferret? Seeing that the blood ferret was full of hostility, he finally couldn't help but laugh. Chu Luiwei, is this your magical beast? Could it be that he was joking? Although the blood ferret was a third-grade magical beast, it had almost no combat ability. Normally, it could be played with as a pet, but in a battle like this, it would be of no help to its owner. He had thought that Chu Luiwei was very powerful, but now, it seemed that she was just a little girl with an immature mind. She didn't even have a magical beast. This blood ferret was most likely raised by her for fun, wasn't it? What a joke. Hearing his words, the hostility in Dumpling's eyes intensified. Mocking Chu Luiwei was mocking the blood ferret. The next moment, its small, as of an eye's eyes. Its speed was extremely fast. Everyone could only see it drawing a red arc in the air. It was actually heading straight for the moon devourer. Heng twos to the end. A mantis is a mantis to stop. The power of the moon devourer was extremely powerful. This time, it was likely that it would directly take the blood ferret's life. Kill it. Chu Luiwei wanted to stop it, but she couldn't say a complete word because of the pressure. Dumpling was too impulsive. Inside the moon devourer's ball was roar. Tuanzi directly pounced on the ball that was emitting a terrible power. Chu Luiwei was stunned. That's not right. She was already out of breath from the pressure, and the blood in her body was in turmoil. How could Dumpling just rush over? How did it get over? Before she could figure it out, something even more shocking happened. Dumpling opened its mouth and bit down. Crack. A crisp sound was heard. Dumpling had bitten a hole in the ball. Its cheeks were puffed up, and its head was almost as big as half its body. Crack, crack, crack. Gulp. Along with this series of sounds, Tuanzi actually chewed and swallowed the piece of meat that it had bitten off. The huge square was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Almost everyone's eyes widened as they looked at the scene in disbelief. Even Chu Luiwei's eyes twitched. What just happened? Dumpling ate that thing? Ate it? Although it looked like a glass crystal, it wasn't. It was full of condensed force. Heng Jingchua was stunned. He had spent a lot of effort to cultivate this move. Ever since he succeeded, he had always kept it as his trump card. Once he used it, he would never lose. Something like this had never happened before. While everyone was still in a daze, Dumpling opened its mouth again and bit off another big piece. The gap on the ball was even bigger now. As it moved, the force on the ball began to deplete rapidly. Soon, it had swallowed half of the ball. Heng Jingchua started to feel uneasy. It couldn't go on like this. He didn't have time to think about what was going on with the blood ferret. He had to stop it. Or else, he quickly went forward. However, just as he moved, he realized that the blood ferret had grabbed the remaining half of the ball and ran away. As it ran, it ate the ball at an even faster speed. Crack, crack, crack. Heng Jingchua almost went crazy when he heard the sound. His origin power was contained in it. If it was swallowed, he didn't know how long it would take for him to recover. However, he soon realized that his speed was not as fast as the blood ferret's. Thus, he could only watch as the sphere became smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, until, gulp, Dumpling stuffed the last bit into its mouth and swallowed it. Hung Jingshua's movements suddenly froze, and his body trembled slightly. It was gone. His force was gone just like that. Dumpling, are you okay? Chu Luiyue finally recovered. She quickly went forward and looked at it nervously. Dumpling's eyes were wide open, and its body was swaying as if it couldn't stand properly. Chu Luiyue was even more worried. I told you not to, burp. Dumpling suddenly let out a loud burp. Chu Luiyue was speechless. Why did it look like it was drunk? Before she could react, Dumpling had already turned around and looked at Heng Jingshua. It suddenly spat out a black ball that flew toward Heng Jingshua. Heng Jingshua widened his eyes in shock. It actually spat out that thing? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 230. Heng Jingshua retreated without hesitation, trying to avoid that thing. However, Dumpling had eaten a ball of force, and her blood was boiling. She moved too quickly, and Heng Jingshua had no time to dodge. In a moment of desperation, he raised his arm in an attempt to block it. Poochie! Everyone saw a small black ball spit out from the blood ferret's mouth, and it pierced through Heng Jingshua's forearm. Red blood splattered everywhere. A bloody hole appeared on Heng Jingshua's arm. Heng Jingshua's face turned pale from the intense pain. However, compared to the pain, there was more fear on his face. He raised his injured arm with his other hand, and his whole body was trembling violently from fear. That thing could not be touched. A cold chill was spreading from the wound. Heng Jingshua's face was ashen. Then, he took out a flying knife and stabbed it into the wound, gouging it out viciously. A piece of flesh fell off. When everyone saw this scene, their hearts were filled with horror. Heng Jingshua had gouged out a piece of flesh from his arm. What is he doing? Cheng Han stood up abruptly, but he saw that Heng Jingshua did not stop. Instead, he continued to gouge out the flesh around the wound. One piece after another, and some were even attached to the skin. It looked extremely bloody and cruel. If it were anyone else, they would not be able to withstand such pain. However, Heng Jingshua seemed to have gone crazy, and he did not stop. In the blink of an eye, 1/3 of the flesh on his arm had been gouged out, and the white bones were clearly visible. Jingshua! Stop right now! However, Heng Jingshua did not seem to hear him at all. His body was trembling as if he was going to gouge out the flesh from his entire arm. Some of the more cowardly people had already covered their eyes, unable to bear to watch. Even if it was a one-hit kill, it would still be more satisfying than this. His actions were even scarier than killing someone. It sent chills down everyone's spine. Cheng Han looked at Chu Luiyue furiously and shouted in a low voice, Chu Luiyue, what the hell is going on? What did you do to Jingshua? Chu Luiyue spat out a mouthful of blood and raised his hand to wipe off the bloodstain on his lips. She felt the chaotic aura in her body gradually calm down. Only then did she look at Cheng Han unhurriedly. There was a mocking smile on her lips, and there seemed to be ice condensing in her eyes. Director Cheng Han, you should ask Heng Jingshua himself. He knew very well what he had done. What nonsense are you talking about? Cheng Han pointed at Chu Luiyue with an ugly expression. Jingshua is in this state because of you. Everyone can see it. You actually want to make a false countercharge. If you don't give me a satisfactory explanation for what happened today, don't even think about leaving. Hearing this, Sun Zhongyan laughed indifferently, but the pressure on his body gradually increased. Brother Cheng Han, why can't we talk things over nicely? Why are you threatening the child? Cheng Han took a deep breath, but when he saw that Heng Jingshua had no intention of stopping, he could not suppress the anger in his heart. Sun Zhongyan, are you trying to cover up for Chu Luiyue? Sun Zhongyan's smile faded a little. Lu Yu is a student of Tianlu Academy. How can I let others bully him? Cheng Han, you're an elder. Before this matter is investigated, it's best that you don't speak nonsense. Are you threatening me? I wouldn't dare. I'm just stating the facts. The two of them went back and forth, and the atmosphere immediately became tense. Chu Luiyue hugged Dumpling in her arms. However, she saw it staring at her with a pair of dazed eyes. It tilted its head and rubbed against her palm eagerly and affectionately, as if it did not realize what earth-shattering thing it had just done. Her heart warmed. If it were not for Dumpling, she would have been in danger today. After patting Dumpling, Chu Luiyue looked at the two of them. Elder son, this matter was caused by the student. Let the student settle it himself. Sun Zhongyan looked at her hesitantly. With Cheng Han acting like this, he definitely wouldn't take things lying down. How was she going to deal with this? All right. However, don't worry. The academy will definitely not let its students suffer. Chu Luiyue nodded. Thank you, Elder Sunday. Cheng Han waved his sleeves fiercely. I'd like to see what kind of explanation you can give. Chu Luiyue did not immediately answer his question. Instead, she walked toward Heng Jingshui. Heng Jingshui's attention was all on his arm at this moment. He turned a deaf ear to everything else. He did not even realize that Chu Luiyue had walked in front of him. In fact, even if he knew, he could not care less. Chu Luiyue looked at him calmly, and her gaze quickly brushed past his bloody arm. She looked like she was smiling but not at the same time. Ah, it's already stained with blood. Then, even if you cut off your entire arm, it doesn't seem to be of any use. Hearing this, Heng Jingshui's movements suddenly froze. A look of despair appeared in his eyes. How could he not know this? He was just holding on to his last hope. Bang! While he was in a daze, Chu Luiyue suddenly lifted her long leg and kicked him hard. Heng Jingshui was not prepared. At this moment, he had no intention to fight. He was directly kicked out by Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue used all her strength this time. The two of them were not far from the edge of the arena. Heng Jingshui flew out and directly out of the arena. Then, he fell hard onto the ground. His body left a deep trail of blood on the ground, which made him look particularly pitiful. Chu Luiyue! Cheng Han shouted angrily. What are you doing? Chu Luiyue's eyes curved. She smiled very politely. Oh, nothing. I just thought that since we're already at this stage, it's just right to end this competition first. After all, she still wanted to win. Cheng Han's chest felt like it was being burned by a ball of fire. He almost could not control himself and went forward to teach Chu Luiyue a lesson himself. Chu Luiyue seemed to have predicted what he was going to do. She spoke first. Director Cheng Han, don't you want to know why Heng Jingshui suddenly became like this? Please take a look again. Cheng Han turned his head to look. Heng Jingshui fell down from the arena. However, he still seemed to be immersed in that strange state. He did not have time to get up from the ground. The first thing he did was to pick up the flying dagger that was thrown to the side. He gritted his teeth. As if he had made a huge decision, he slashed the dagger at his own shoulder. It looked like he was going to cut off his entire arm. Cheng Han lifted his finger. A ray of force flew out and knocked the flying dagger out of his hand. If he lost this arm, Heng Jingshui's future path of cultivation would be filled with difficulties. However, Heng Jingshui hurriedly picked up the flying dagger. It looked like he was going to continue. Chu Luiyue's lips curled slightly. Her tone was cold. Once the 7 coldness poison comes into contact with blood, it will quickly seep into the limbs and bones. Although you seem to be helping him by stopping him like this, in reality, it's equivalent to forcing him onto the path of no return. Chapter 231. 7 Coldness Poison? Many people's expressions changed when they heard the name. Cheng Han was stunned for a moment. 7 coldness poison was highly toxic. Once exposed, it would spread throughout the body. After 7 days, the person would freeze to death. Could it be that Heng Jingshui was poisoned by the 7 coldness poison? He quickly walked towards Heng Jingshui. When he got closer, he saw that there was indeed a thin layer of black frost on his arm. On top of the badly mutilated wound, it looked especially strange. This, Cheng Han's heart skipped a beat. Heng Jingshui had such a big wound on his body. The 7 coldness poison must have already entered his lungs and could not be saved. He was completely done for. Cheng Han looked at Chu Luiyue furiously. Chu Luiyue, you are really vicious. How dare you poison someone in the Qingjiao competition? Chu Luiwei sneered. Dean Chenghan, you should take a closer look. This 7 coldness poison was obviously brought by Heng Jingchua himself. When he attacked just now, he put the 7 coldness poison in the Moon Devourer. He wanted to kill me without anyone noticing. He did not expect my fiend to see through his plan and turn the tables on him. He is just reaping what he sowed. How can he blame me? She glanced at Heng Jingchua coldly. I haven't held him accountable for trying to kill me. You're lying. Cheng Han immediately recalled that the blood ferret had indeed spat out a ball of black stuff that injured Heng Jingchua. Now that he thought about it, it must be the 7 coldness poison. That thing was obviously spat out from your fiend's mouth. It must be you, Dean Chenghan, you're so forgetful. Don't you remember that my fiend spat out that thing after swallowing the ball of Moon Devourer? Chu Luiwei patted Dumpling and said slowly. Just as you said earlier, everyone saw it clearly. Cheng Han was speechless. In fact, he had already realized that something was wrong and was starting to feel guilty. However, how could he admit it at this moment? If he admitted it, not only would Heng Jingchua, but he and the entire Tai Yen Academy would also be humiliated. They would become the laughing stock of everyone. It was a taboo to use poison in the Qingjiao competition. Sun Zhongyan quickly stepped forward and took a closer look at Heng Jingchua. His expression turned cold. Although I'm not a celestial physician, I can still recognize 7 coldness poison. Cheng Han, you better give everyone an explanation for this matter. Cheng Han's face turned pale, and for a moment, he didn't know how to refute. At this moment, Heng Jingchua had already chopped off his arm. Blood splattered everywhere. He let out an extremely miserable shriek that made one's heart tremble. The square was completely silent. Even those who didn't know what the 7 coldness poison was couldn't help but feel fear when they saw this scene. They didn't dare to say a word. Amidst this awkward and tense silence, a voice suddenly sounded. Miss Chu, you keep saying that Jing Chua brought the 7 colds poison himself. But do you have any evidence? Chu Luiwen narrowed his eyes. Why is this Situ Xingchen so dramatic? What has this matter got to do with her? Situ Xingchen stepped forward and said, although your blood ferret spat out the 7 coldness poison after it swallowed the Moon Devourer, there's no 7 coldness poison in it. What if the 7 coldness poison wasn't in the Moon Devourer and the blood ferret brought it with him? A strange light flashed across her eyes. If there's really no problem between you and the blood ferret, why did you leave the crystal barrier despite knowing that the Moon Devourer was powerful? Eldest Princess Situ, your question is interesting. I'm clearly the one who was harmed, but you want me to prove my innocence? Chu Luiwen knitted his brows. Situ Xingchen calmly said, Jing Chua is powerful. Jing Chua is very powerful. He is more than 1 level higher than you. He can win against you no matter how he fights. Why would he use such a despicable method? Chu Luiwei laughed out loud when she heard this. It seems like eldest Princess Situ doesn't want to admit that I won against Situ Ziyue earlier. If I didn't see wrongly, he's still resting behind you. It's hard for him to even stand up. Situ Xingchen's expression changed slightly. It's fine to talk about other things, but Chu Luiwei is clearly humiliating me on purpose when he talks about my brother. That's just, since I can win against Situ Ziyue, why can't I win against Heng Jingchua? As for why he used such a method when he's so strong, only he knows. Chu Liuyue's lips curved up slightly, and he revealed a meaningful smile. After all, he even did something to Rong Jin. Once this sentence came out, it was no different from a clap of thunder. After being dazed for a while, everyone was in an uproar. Chu Liuyue's words clearly meant, Lu Yu, is what you said true? Asked Sun Zhongyan anxiously with tightly knitted brows. He was also poisoned. If you don't believe me, you can go and check. Oh, Director Cheng Han and eldest Princess Situ should also take a look, in case you say that we did something in secret. Chu Luiwei generously lifted his chin. He's still over there. Sun Zhongyan and the rest hurriedly walked over. Zhuo Rong, who was looking after Rong Jin, was confused. 7 coldness poison? I didn't notice it. Xian Tsang rushed over first and grabbed Rong Jin's wrist again as his expression became increasingly solemn. He had already checked Rong Jin's pulse once, but he didn't find anything. It was the same this time. What did Chu Luiyue say? He turned around hesitantly. Sun Zhongyan hurriedly asked, "How is it?" Xian Song and Zhuo Rong fell silent. Sun Zhongyan's heart sank. At this point, Cheng Han had already walked over. He glanced at the unconscious Rong Jin and coldly shouted, "Why are you still here? Isn't he fine? How is he poisoned?" Chu Luiyue, even if you're lying, you can't say something that can't be exposed so easily, right? What else do you have to say now? Chu Luiyue looked at Zhuo Rong. "Teacher Zhuo Rong, please cut Rong Jin's finger." Zhuo Rong didn't know what was going on, but he still did as he was told. A silver light flashed, and a wound appeared on Rong Jin's finger. Red blood quickly seeped out. But soon, the blood droplet quickly condensed and was covered with a thin layer of black frost. Zhuo Rong was shocked. "It's indeed 7 coldness poison." Everyone was shocked. Cheng Han's words were stuck in his throat. Xian Song went closer and carefully checked before saying, "It's indeed 7 coldness poison. It's definitely 7 coldness poison. It's just that the dosage is very small, so it can't be seen from the outside." As he spoke, guilt and self-blame grew in his heart. We actually didn't notice it earlier. If we let the 7 coldness poison spread, Rong Jin would have died. Zhuo Rong hurriedly took out a pill and fed it to Rong Jin. Even though it couldn't cure the poison, it could temporarily suppress it. Even Sun Zhongyan was a little scared. Rong Jin was the crown prince after all. If something really happened to him, the academy couldn't escape the blame. Chu Luiyue looked at Cheng Han and Sidu Xingchen. The person who fought with Rong Jin just now was Heng Jingchua. Could it be that the 7 colds poison in his body was also sent by me through the air? Love Network has a much better reading experience. Chapter 232. Cheng Han was speechless. The 7 coldness poison in Rong Jin's body was the best evidence. Even if he wanted to refute, he could not think of a single word at this point. He only felt embarrassed. This was even more so for Situ Xingchen. Previously, she was the one who suspected Chu Luiyue, and she was also the one who asked Chu Luiyue to take out the evidence. Now, everything was clear. Countless pairs of eyes landed on her, making her feel uneasy. So Rong Jin was poisoned too. This must be Heng Jingchua's doing. Yeah. Chu Luiyue never interacted with Rong Jin from the start to the end. How could it be her? I knew it. Rong Jin and Heng Jingchua are clearly of the same level, so how could Heng Jingchua win so easily? It turns out that he used such despicable means. I think that he might not have won the previous competitions with his true abilities. I really don't know how Taiyan Academy teaches people to do such a thing. Also, Situ Xingchen has been speaking up for her academy's people from the start. Heng Jingchua clearly did something wrong, but she's suspicious. Rumors say that she's understanding, generous, and smart. Why can't I tell? Hey, it's just a rumor. You'll only know if it's true when you see it. Don't you think that she seems to be targeting Chu Luiyue? Could it be that Chu Luiyue offended her because he argued with her the day before? That's hard to say. After all, she's the high and mighty eldest princess. All sorts of discussions were like sharp knives that harshly pierced her body, making her feel extremely embarrassed and in pain. Situ Xingchen had been pampered since she was young. Even her father had never flared up at her. When had she ever been criticized like this? Situ Xingchen felt her face burning, and she wanted to find a hole to hide in. Cheng Han, your student used such despicable means to win in the Qin Jiao competition. Don't you have an explanation? Said Sun Zhongyan coldly with a solemn expression. That's right. The nature of this matter is very bad. We can't let it go just like that. Fu Yunshan, who had been sitting at the side and watching the competition, finally expressed his stance with an equally solemn expression. Previously, someone from Nanfeng Academy had also fought with Heng Jingchua. Besides, who knew if there was anyone else besides Heng Jingchua who was doing this? The two of them interrogated Cheng Han, causing him to feel extremely embarrassed. I don't know about this either. You are the dean, and he is a student of your academy. Whether you know it or not, you have to take responsibility for this matter, right? Sun Zhongyan interrupted him. Cheng Han felt extremely sullen in his heart. He really didn't know. If he had known, he would never have let Heng Jingchua come. Furthermore, he wouldn't speak up for him. Just now, he thought that Tai Yin Academy would still be the #1 warrior this year. However, in the blink of an eye, not only did they lose the #1 spot, but they even became the target of public criticism. In a moment of desperation, he could only look at Heng Jingchua and scold him. "Speak. Where did you get this from?" The 7 colds poison was not a poison that ordinary people could obtain. Heng Jingchua didn't come from a prestigious family and had always kept a low profile in school. This 7 coldness poison really came out of nowhere. However, Heng Jingchua ignored Cheng Han. He just lay on the ground, curled up into a ball, and trembled all over. "Speak." Cheng Han wanted to walk over and kick him, but he remembered that he had the 7 coldness poison in his body and stopped in his tracks. Heng Jingchua still didn't respond. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. He suddenly thought of something and walked over to Heng Jingchua. "Luiyue, be careful." Sun Zhongyan hurriedly shouted. Chu Luiyue shook his head, indicating that he didn't need to worry. He took a few more steps forward and took a closer look. When he took a look, his expression changed slightly. "He's dying." "What?" Everyone was shocked. Sun Zhongyan and Fu Yunshan immediately went forward. They saw that Heng Jingchua's broken arm had already frozen, and it had even spread to his entire face. The poison had taken effect. At this stage, there was only death for him. He would die soon, and there was no way to save him. Why did the poison take effect so quickly? Fu Yunshan frowned and asked. There should still be poison in his body. It was triggered by the 7 coldness poison, so Sun Zhongyan's words cast a shadow over everyone's hearts. If that was the case, it proved that Heng Jingchua was under someone's orders. But in his current state, they would definitely not be able to find out who was behind this. Fu Yunshan was a little anxious. Is there no way to save his life first? Once we find out? Before he could finish, Heng Jingchua's body suddenly trembled violently. He let out a painful whimper between his lips and teeth. It was like a cry of despair in the dark night. It sent chills down everyone's spines. Soon, his movements gradually quieted down. Finally, there was no more sound. Fu Yunshan and Sun Zhongyan looked at each other, their eyes filled with worry. Chu Luiyue had already accepted this fact. He gently comforted Dumpling, who was in his arms, and fell into deep thought. No wonder Heng Jingchua was so flustered when he was injured. He was not only worried about the 7 coldness poison, but he was also worried that it would trigger the other poisons in his body. The other poisons must be something that the person behind him used to control him. In the end, he was just a pawn. But who was the person behind him? There was no need for that person to come in first place in the Qingjiao competition. What was the reason? Fu Yunshan thought for a while and said, although he's already dead, if we can find out what the poison in his body is, we might be able to gain something. Cheng Han, you won't object to this, right? What could Cheng Han say? He could only agree. Since things have already come to this, we should naturally discuss this together. We can also use this opportunity to clear Tai Yin Academy's name. He did not want his reputation to be tarnished because of Heng Jingchua. However, at that moment, a black fog suddenly emerged from Heng Jingchua's body. Cold, sinister. Chu Luiyue felt a strong sense of uneasiness. In the next moment, the black fog quickly spread and enveloped Heng Jingchua completely. Then, his body started to corrode at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not long after, his corpse transformed into a pool of blood on the ground and completely disappeared. The black fog also dissipated and disappeared without a trace. Only the messy bloodstains on the ground were left, indicating what had just happened. Digression: I went out for a day yesterday and accidentally fell asleep at night. Today's update will be updated at around midnight. I did not update on time, so I owe you one. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 233. No one had expected things to turn out this way. Now, there were no clues at all. They could not find anything at all. Cheng Han wanted to get to the bottom of this matter more than anyone else. Now that things had turned out this way, it was like a fishbone stuck in his throat. Let's put this matter aside for now. After the Qingjiao competition ends, we'll start investigating immediately. Sun Zhongyan said in a low voice. With such a thing happening, their hearts were filled with worry. However, it was obvious that the other party was meticulous and ruthless. It was definitely not something they could find out in a day or two. The Qingjiao competition had to continue. Fu Yunshan glanced at Cheng Han as if he was looking at a joke. At this moment, the people from Taiyan Academy were probably the ones who felt the most heartbroken. They did not know that such a huge scourge was hiding in the academy. Now that they thought about it, they felt extremely disgusted. Alright, Han Jingchua is a student of Taiyan Academy after all. I think we should let Brother Cheng Han handle this matter. We'll assist you. How about that? Cheng Han almost could not maintain his composure anymore. Whatever you say, it's the truth. Then he turned around and returned to his seat. It was obvious that he did not want to speak anymore. Even so, he felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles. If he did not get to the bottom of this, he and the entire Taiyan Academy would not be able to clear their names. Not only did he not get first place, but he also got himself into trouble. What was this? Chu Luiwei put away her thoughts and smiled at Xiao Wenling and the rest. Oh right, according to the rules, you guys can continue to challenge me? Xiao Wenling and the rest, who were suddenly called out, shuddered and quickly shook their heads. No. I'm not challenging you. I'm not challenging you either. I'm injured. I'm not going to compete. I think my ranking is quite good. Chu Luiwei raised her brows. It was fine if they did not want to challenge her. Why did they make it seem like she was some demon? Looking at them, those who did not know would think that she was very scary. However, she did not know that she was indeed a very terrifying existence in their eyes. No, it should be said that most of the people in the square thought so. The scene of her blood ferret swallowing Heng Jinchua's moon devourer was still deeply imprinted in everyone's minds, and they couldn't forget it. At this time, who would be so reckless as to challenge Chu Luiwei? What if the blood ferret bit his neck? Are you sure you don't want to continue? No. Several people denied in unison. Chu Luiwei's red lips curved into a brilliant smile. If that's the case, Elder Sun, is the warrior competition over? Only then did Sun Zhongyan regain his senses. That's right. If no one challenged him, then Chu Luiwei would be the true #1 warrior. His originally worried mood immediately lightened up, and the wrinkles on his face bloomed into a smile. I declare, the champion of this year's Qingjiao competition is Tianlu Academy's Chu Luiwei. Han Jingchua aside, Chu Luiwei winning first place still made everyone from the Tianlu Academy celebrate. One had to know that they had not won first place for 3 whole years. With such a powerful genius, they naturally basked in the glory. Nanfeng Academy was still alright, but Taiyan Academy was utterly humiliated. They were full of confidence when they came, but who knew that things would turn out like this? Cheng Han took a deep breath and kept persuading himself. Being #1 in the warrior competition is not a big deal. There are still Xian Masters and Celestial Physician after them. The 3 Xian Master Academies are considered to be on par. No one knows who will win in the end. However, I still have Situ Xingchen. As long as I can become #1 in the Celestial Physician competition, I can redeem myself. Luyu, after the Qingjiao competition ends, you can choose from any of the 3 academies and enter their library. You can borrow books for free for a month. Have you thought of which academy you want to go to? Asked Sun Zhongyan cheerfully. Chu Luiwei thought for a while and smiled. I haven't thought about it yet. Sun Zhongyan did not mind. Then think about it again. The Qingjiao competition will end in 2 days. It's the same for your selection. Nobody expected this girl to win first place, so it was normal for her to not think about it. Chu Luiwei obediently agreed and returned to her seat. Si Yang was dazed. You actually won first place, Luyu. Are you still going to participate in the Xian Master competition? Why not? Asked Chu Luiwei. I'm sitting in the Xian Master seat. Si Yang said sincerely, You've already won first place. You've already gotten first place in the warrior tournament and defeated so many people. You don't have to worry about us, do you? Chu Luiwei stared at him intently. Didn't you say that the Qing Jiao competition's rewards are very generous? Si Yang covered his face in despair. It's all my fault for saying that. The third day of the competition ended just like that. The news of Chu Luiwei winning first place quickly spread throughout the imperial city. At the same time, many people also knew that Heng Jingchua had poisoned her. At night, at Crown Prince Mansion, Rong Jin lay on the bed with a pale face. Chu Xianmin was carefully serving him in front of the bed. However, her gaze was somewhat erratic. In actual fact, she was listening to Zhuo Rong and the Empress talking outside the screen. It's our negligence that caused His Highness to be poisoned. Luckily, the dosage was small, and His Highness had always been strong, so it wasn't very serious. Now that the remaining poison has been removed, he just needs to rest for a while, and he'll be fine. This was Zhuo Rong's voice. In the academy, he was the teacher, and Rong Jin was the student. However, this was Crown Prince Mansion, so they naturally had to follow the hierarchy. Teachers were wrong, you're too polite. If it weren't for you, the Crown Prince would have. The Empress immediately rushed over when she heard the news. Even though Zhuo Rong said that Rong Jin was fine, she still felt scared. Zhuo Rong sighed. Actually, the person you should thank isn't me but Lu Yu. If she didn't discover it early, we wouldn't have known that His Highness was poisoned. Once the time was delayed, it would be really dangerous. The Empress paused. Chu Luiwei. The Empress was silent for a while before she softly said, "She's a good girl. She's a good child. Don't worry, when there's an opportunity, Ben Gong will personally go and thank her." Chu Xianmin unconsciously clenched her fists. Chu Luiwei. Chu Luiwei again. Now, even the Empress said that. Water. A weak moan was heard. Chu Xianmin hurriedly looked at the bed and saw that Rong Jin had opened his eyes. Your Highness. Your Highness, you're awake? That's great. Water is here. Chu Xianmin hurriedly passed the water beside her over and carefully fed him. The people outside heard the commotion and hurriedly came in. When the Empress saw that Rong Jin was awake, her eyes turned red, and she directly pounced on him. Jin, you're finally awake. Chu Xianmin hurriedly retreated, but the Empress didn't even look at her. She couldn't help but secretly bite her lips. Rong Jin opened his eyes and asked with difficulty, Did Luiwei save me? You can find a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 234. The Empress didn't expect Rong Jin's first sentence to be this. Her face darkened, and Chu Xianmin even lowered her head to hide all the emotions in her eyes. The Empress patted Rong Jin's arm. Jin, you just woke up, and your body is still very weak. Let's talk about this later. Rong Jin was a little dazed. Actually, he had already woken up and heard most of what Mr. Zhuo Rong and his mother said. Even though he didn't remember what exactly happened, he clearly heard the key words. Heng Jingchao 7 cold poisoned Chu Luiwei. Looking at his mother's reaction, it meant that what they said was true. Rong Jin's heart was instantly filled with mixed feelings. He felt very embarrassed when he was rejected when he invited Chu Luiwei. However, he didn't expect Chu Luiwei to help him at the crucial moment. If it weren't for her, his life would have been. The young girl's cold appearance appeared in front of him again. For some reason, the anger from being offended had completely disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by an indescribable, complicated feeling. She was indeed different from the others. He couldn't help but tightly grab the Empress's arm and anxiously said, "Mother, I have a request." "Mother Empress, I have a request. I hope you will grant it." The Empress was shocked. Rong Jin had been the crown prince for many years, and he rarely used such a pleading tone to speak to her. After all, he was her son, and her heart ached for him. Her voice was much gentler. "Jin, there's no need to ask for anything between us. Whatever you want to do, just say the word." Rong Jin looked at her and said word by word, "I want to marry Chu Luiwei as my crown princess." The Empress's smile froze. Chu Xianmin hurriedly looked up, but she immediately looked down. However, she had already secretly grabbed her sleeves and tightly clenched them. The Empress's voice was cold. Jean, you still have a fever, and your mind isn't very clear. Let's talk about it after you recover. She then stood up to leave. However, Rong Jin was very persistent. Mother, I've made up my mind. If you don't agree, I'll go and beg father. You're crazy. The Empress finally couldn't hold it in and suddenly raised her voice. Don't forget your identity. You're the Crown Prince. As the Crown Prince, how could he go back on his words? Previously, Chu Liwei was a good-for-nothing. Although he was criticized for canceling the engagement with her, it was more or less reasonable. How could the Crown Prince's consort be a good-for-nothing? But now, Rong Jin actually said that he wanted to remarry Chu Liwei? What would others think? What would His Majesty think? That's absurd. However, Rong Jin didn't seem to listen to her at all as he clenched his teeth. I only love her. If I can't marry her, then I won't marry anyone else. The Empress almost fainted from anger. What's so good about that Chu Liwei? There are so many good girls in the world. Why is Rong Jin so obsessed with me all of a sudden? What exactly did I feed Rong Jin? However, seeing Rong Jin's resolute attitude, the Empress didn't dare to insist. Allow me to think about this matter again. At the very least, we have to wait until the Qingjiao competition ends. Rong Jin also knew that it was a little overboard to suddenly raise this request, so he didn't force it. Seeing that the Empress had softened her stance, he stopped while he was ahead. Then I'll thank you first, Mother. The Empress looked at him deeply before she turned around and left. Her thin brows were knitted together. Zhuorong was forced to listen to this conversation at the side, and he was also very embarrassed. He found an excuse and left. Very quickly, only Rong Jin and Chu Xianmin were left in the room. Rong Jin lay back on the bed and looked at the curtains above his head in a daze. However, things related to Chu Liwei kept appearing in his mind. Thinking about it carefully, even though their engagement had lasted for many years, the two of them didn't have much interaction. Now that he wanted to think about it, he realized that it was the same thing over and over again. Rong Jin was a little disappointed. However, once he thought about how Chu Liwei saved his life, he felt a little happy. As long as she wasn't engaged, nobody in the imperial city could fight with him for her. Thinking of this, he looked at Chu Xianmin at the side and hurriedly asked, "Oh, right. Min, weren't you very close to Lu Yu in the past? You should know what she likes, right? What kind of jewelry does she like? What does she usually like to do? Hurry up and tell me." Chu Xianmin almost sneered out loud. What a joke. The Crown Prince, who used to avoid Chu Liwei like the plague, actually wants to remarry. He even started to ask me what Chu Liwei likes. I've never had such thoughts about her. I really didn't consider her at all when I asked all these questions. Chu Xianmin suppressed the jealousy and anger in her heart and lightly said, "Your Highness, you should take care of your body first. I'll naturally tell you all these things one by one." Rong Jin was then relieved. He mumbled for a while before he fell into a deep sleep. Chu Xianmin looked at him coldly. After a while, she revealed a sarcastic smile. Chu Liwei directly returned to her residence. When she went up to the second floor, she almost habitually walked to the window and looked at Yifeng courtyard. Many leaves had fallen in the courtyard, and there was no one on the rattan chair. It looked a little cold. It seems like Rong Xiu hasn't returned yet. She slightly knitted her brows and hid the faint disappointment in her heart. Thinking about it carefully, Rong Xiu had only left for 3 days. She actually felt a little unaccustomed to it. This feeling of being tied down by something was really not good. Chu Liwei stood quietly for a while and planned to close the window. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the night sky. Chu Liwei seemed to have sensed something. She looked over and slightly widened her eyes. Shue Shue. Plop. Shue Shue actually directly jumped in through the window. It jumped into Chu Liu's arms. Chu Liwei staggered a few steps and almost fell to the ground. Shue Shue, why are you? Before she could finish speaking, she smelled a strong smell of blood. Chu Liu's expression suddenly changed, and she hurriedly helped Shue Shue up from her arms. Under the moonlight, she saw that there was a deep wound on Xue Xue's body. It was so deep that the bone could be seen. What's wrong? Who did this to you? Chu Liyue's heart was burning with anger as she asked anxiously. No wonder Xue Xue rushed in and directly pounced on her. It wasn't affectionate acting coquettishly, but because it was too injured and couldn't control itself. Xue Xue's aura was also much weaker. It looked very messy, as if it had just gone through a fierce battle. Hearing Chu Liyue's voice, Xue Xue let out a low whimper. A pair of ice-blue eyes looked at her sadly and nervously. Chu Liyue suddenly thought of something. Where's your master? Xue Xue bit the corner of her clothes and pulled her outside. Chu Liyue's heart sank. Something happened to Rong Xiu. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 235. Where is he? Chu Liyue asked immediately. Xue Xue whimpered and lowered its body. Chu Liyue immediately understood that Xue Xue wanted to bring her there. But, your injury? Xue Xue shook its head and looked at her blankly. Chu Liyue calmed down and suddenly took out a herb from her heaven and earth bag. This is a spirit herb. It can stop bleeding and heal wounds. You can use it first. As she spoke, she quickly crushed the herb and applied it on Xue Xue's wound. The wound, which was so deep that the bones could be seen, began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Chu Liyue was finally relieved and sat on Xue Xue's back. She felt a weight on her shoulder and turned to see that Dumpling had followed her. Let's go. Chu Liyue patted Xue Xue's head lightly, and Xue Xue leaped out of the window. In the night, the figures of a human and two beasts rushed out quickly. When they passed through the barrier of the academy, Chu Liyue was a little worried, but Xue Xue did not seem to care. When they got close to the barrier, a silver glow suddenly spread out from Xue Xue's body and enveloped Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue immediately felt that her aura was isolated, and she passed through the barrier without causing any fluctuations. Soon, she left the academy completely and headed west. Chu Liyue looked back and saw the silhouette of Tianlu Academy gradually disappear into the night. Chu Liyue retracted her gaze and realized that although Xue Xue was injured, it was still very fast. It was indeed a high-level fiend. Even if it was injured, its combat power was still very strong. However, she did not know what kind of trouble Rong Xiu had encountered that even Xue Xue was injured in the Imperial City, or rather in the entire country Yaochen. There seemed to be no fiend that could compare to Xue Xue. As for Rong Xiu, his strength was even more mysterious. No one knew who he had encountered. At this time, Chu Liyue didn't think about it at all. If even Rong Xiu couldn't solve it, with her current strength, she wouldn't be of much help. All she could think of was to be faster, faster. Now that Rong Xiu was in trouble, she could not sit back and do nothing. She couldn't do it either. Very quickly, Chu Liyue realized that Xue Xue had already brought her out of the Imperial City gates. Her expression became more and more serious. At that time, Rong Xiu said that he was going to leave for a while, and she didn't ask him where he was going. Looking at it now, it was indeed outside the imperial capital. Xue Xue headed towards the forest outside the imperial capital. Gradually, under the moonlight, Chu Liyue began to feel that the scenery before him was somewhat familiar. This forest seemed to be the place where she was reborn. That is, the forest where the original host was assassinated outside the city. After passing through the dense forest, Xue Xue finally flew down in a certain direction. After landing, Chu Liyue looked carefully and saw a sparkling lake. At this time, the moonlight was just right, and the lake was shrouded in a layer of faint white smoke, looking even more tranquil. This is the place where she first met Rong Xiu. Xue Xue, why did you bring me here? Chu Liyue got down from Xue Xue and quickly looked around, but she didn't see Rong Xiu. Where's your master? Not only was Rong Xiu not there, but there was no one around except her. Xue Xue whimpered and walked towards the lake. Then, it stopped beside the lake and looked at the lake, seeming a little anxious. Chu Liyue stared blankly for a while before suddenly reacting. You're saying that Rong Xiu is in this lake? Shui nodded and its claws scratched the ground anxiously. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. When she first met Rong Xiu, he was indeed here. He also said that this was his territory. But now, Shui actually said that Rong Xiu was under this lake. The lake was calm. Only the dense origin power on its surface made it look different from ordinary lakes. Chu Luiyue walked over and looked at the lake hesitantly. Is under here? Suddenly her eyes focused. When the white fog gradually dispersed, she saw that under the clear water, there seemed to be a silver stream of light. Her heart skipped a beat and she immediately looked forward. There was the same scene under the lake in the distance. This stream of light was faintly discernible under the lake. It wasn't very clear to begin with, and with the fog above the lake, it was even harder to distinguish. If one didn't stand closer, they definitely wouldn't be able to detect this abnormality. Chu Luiyue focused her gaze and gradually widened her eyes. The intertwined lines of light looked very similar to a teleportation array. Chu Luiyue blurted out in shock. She never expected that there would be a teleportation array hidden under the lake. Moreover, if she wasn't wrong, this teleportation array's level wasn't low. Chu Luiyue looked at the intertwined streams of light below and could already vaguely feel the pressure from the teleportation array. She didn't speak for a long time. Rong Xiu actually hid a teleportation array here. Chu Luiyue realized that she had still underestimated Rong Xiu. Such a teleportation array required at least 3 level 5 Xian masters to build. How many level 5 Xian masters were there in the entire country Yaochen? Rong Xiu, he actually, just as countless thoughts flashed through her mind, Shui suddenly went forward and nudged her knees. Chu Luiyue glanced at it and vaguely realized something. Rong Xiu was probably at the place where this teleportation array would reach. We can only find Rong Xiu if we go down from here, right? Shui nodded again, looking increasingly anxious. Chu Luiyue made up her mind. She hugged Dumpling and jumped down. Let's go. When Chu Luiyue jumped into the lake, she saw the white fog above quickly disperse in all directions. The teleportation array below shone brightly and quickly enveloped her. The lake water consciously parted. Only then did Chu Luiyue realize that the light from the teleportation array automatically formed a barrier around her, perfectly protecting her. The surrounding lake water also avoided it because of this. Chu Luiyue looked at the silver barrier around her strangely. Why would this teleportation array automatically protect her? It wasn't as if she had never seen a teleportation array before. She had even built many of them herself, so she knew more about them. The biggest use of a normal teleportation array was to connect 2 spaces, allowing people to quickly travel from one place to another. Inside the teleportation array, because it was connected to the void, there would often be violent energy flowing around. It was inevitable that there would be some danger when passing through it. Sometimes, in order to avoid this, some small mechanisms would be specially set up when building the teleportation array. For example, when someone passed through the teleportation array and the teleportation array sensed their aura, it would automatically form a barrier to protect them. However, she didn't know that there was a teleportation array here and had never used it before. How could this happen? However, this doubt only flashed through her mind. In the next moment, she felt her body being pulled down by a force. Her surroundings instantly fell into darkness. Wonderful book house. Chapter 236. She hugged Dumpling tightly in her arms and sensed that Shui was by her feet. Only then did she relax and know that they had already entered the teleportation array. The surroundings were filled with the whistling of the wind caused by the turbulence. Chu Luiyue had no doubt that if not for the protection of this barrier, she would have been torn apart by the violent turbulence the moment she entered. The surroundings were pitch black and she couldn't see anything. Chu Luiyue's heart gradually rose. Everything was indicating that Rong Xiu had too many secrets. Every time she thought she had understood enough, she would realize that what she saw was only the tip of the iceberg. At the very least, this teleportation array was definitely not something that a small princely of country Yaochen could do. After an unknown period of time, Chu Luiyue finally saw a ray of light in front of her eyes. We're here. A powerful pressure surged from all directions. Chu Liuyue's eyes were instantly covered by white light. She raised her hand to cover her eyes. When the light gradually dimmed, she put down her hand and looked around. When she saw the scene in front of her clearly, she finally widened her eyes and her heart was filled with shock. This was actually a sea. It was nighttime, and only a bright moon hung in the dark night sky. A faint light shone down, and the dark blue surface of the sea sparkled. The seawater kept surging and hitting the reef in a cycle. She was currently standing on the shore. Looking back, there was an endless desert. Looking forward, there was an even more mysterious sea. In the distance, where the sea met the sky, there seemed to be a huge curtain hanging down from the sky and connecting with the sea. The curtain looked incomparably dark. Occasionally, 1 or 2 golden streams of light would flash across it and disappear in the blink of an eye. A boundless pressure spread out from it, causing people to unconsciously submit to it. Chu Luiyue looked at this scene in shock and was speechless for a long time. This curtain? On the Black Tortoise continent, there were many countries. However, these countries were also divided into ranks. For example, the Tianling dynasty was considered a superior country, while country Yaochen was only a subordinate country. The Tianling dynasty's territory was surrounded by these curtains. It was also known as the Heaven's Canopy. Anyone who wanted to enter the Tianling dynasty had to pass through their Heaven's Canopy. In reality, this Heaven's Canopy wasn't man-made. It existed naturally. The existence of Heaven's Canopy divided the Black Tortoise continent into 2 levels. Empires within Heaven's Canopy, such as the Tianling dynasty, had rich heaven and earth origin force. The cultivation environment there was much better than outside Heaven's Canopy. To them, the Heaven's Canopy was the protection of nature, and it also represented the honor bestowed by the heavens. There were too many people who wanted to enter Heaven's Canopy. However, the Heaven's Canopy was extremely powerful. Only when a cultivator's strength was strong enough could they successfully enter it. When she was in power, she had also heard that countless cultivators outside the Tianling dynasty's territory tried to pass through Heaven's Canopy every year. However, only a few succeeded in the end. Chu Luiyue never expected that she would be directly outside Heaven's Canopy from that transportation portal. However, her gaze was quickly attracted by the scene in midair. A tall white figure was standing in midair. Even though his back was facing her, she could still recognize that it was Rong Xiu. Just as she was about to speak, she suddenly heard a sinister and mocking voice coming from midair. "Your Highness, I haven't seen you for a while. Has your strength decreased so much?" Chu Luiyue looked in the direction of the voice and saw that there was actually another person standing opposite Rong Xiu. However, he was wearing a black robe with a hood on his head. The darkness of the night concealed his figure. Therefore, Chu Luiyue didn't see him at first glance. Rong Xiu laughed softly. "It seems that your Highness has been living too comfortably recently. That's why you came to court death." Chu Luiyue was taken aback. "Your Highness?" Was he referring to Rong Xiu? Country Yaochen didn't seem to have a Your Highness, right? Where did this identity of Rong Xiu come from? Moreover, she felt that the Rong Xiu in front of her now seemed to be different from the person she knew in the past. She had never heard Rong Xiu speak in such a tone. Cold, majestic, disdainful, with the absolute suppression of a superior. "I forgot that this is outside Heaven's Canopy. Your realm is suppressed, so your strength is naturally greatly reduced. Otherwise, why couldn't you even take 10 of my moves?" The black-robed man's voice was sharp and cold. It was as if a sharp weapon was scraping against glass, making one feel very uncomfortable. Chu Luiyue only heard these 2 sentences and felt the force in her body faintly become chaotic. This was caused by the opponent's strength being too strong. Chu Luiyue's brows were tightly knitted. The black-robed man's strength was at least a stage 6 warrior, but his words made Chu Luiyue even more horrified. Rong Xiu's realm was suppressed. Didn't that mean that Rong Xiu's strength was at least a stage 7 warrior? If people outside wanted to enter Heaven's Canopy, their strength had to be at least a stage 6 warrior. But at most, they were at the peak of stage 6. This was because cultivators outside Heaven's Canopy could only cultivate to this realm. If they wanted to break through to stage 7, they had to enter Heaven's Canopy. And once a warrior above stage 7 left Heaven's Canopy, their realm would be suppressed to stage 7 and below. Chu Luiwei secretly guessed Rong Xiu's true strength, but she didn't expect him to be so powerful. He wasn't even 20 years old this year, right? This level of talent, even compared to her previous life, was not inferior in the slightest. Don't worry. Even if it's outside Heaven's Canopy, I can still send you on your way. Rong Xiu smiled casually as if he didn't care about the other party at all. But Chu Luiwei's sharp eyes saw that the corner of his clothes seemed to be stained with blood. "Ha! Your Highness, you're already injured and don't have the strength to fight anymore. I'm curious, how do you plan to kill me? The high and mighty Your Highness, the Holy Sun, has actually fallen to such a state. TSK. If this news were to spread, I'm afraid you won't have the face to continue sitting in this position. But you don't have to worry about these things. After all, your life is going to end here today." As he finished speaking, he suddenly raised his hand. He raised a blood-colored sickle. Blood sickle slash. The surrounding heaven and earth force rapidly gathered. His blood-colored sickle suddenly slashed down. A blood-colored light instantly flew toward Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu waved his sleeves, and a silver disc flew out rapidly. Boom! Two powerful forces fiercely collided together. The sea water violently surged. Soon, the silver disc suddenly cracked. Crack! Chapter 237. Countless streaks of light scattered in all directions. Rong Xiu quickly retreated, but the crimson scythe quickly caught up. Chu Luiwei stood behind a piece of rock, but she was still blown so hard by the strong wind that she could barely stand. Rong Xiu was already injured previously, and this attack put him at a disadvantage. "Your Highness, let's end it here." The black-robed man shouted coldly, and the crimson scythe suddenly changed into several shadows. They all rushed toward Rong Xiu. In the blink of an eye, they surrounded Rong Xiu. At this moment, Rong Xiu raised his wrist. Turbulent waves of seawater suddenly shot up to the sky. It formed a huge water screen in front of him. The crimson scythe rushed into the water screen, but it was as if it had sunk into a swamp, and its speed immediately decreased by a lot. The black-robed man seemed to be shocked. "You can actually control the sea in Heaven's Canopy?" Rong Xiu chuckled. "Not much, but it's enough to deal with you." After saying that, he suddenly snapped his fingers. A silver flame suddenly appeared at the tip of his long, white fingers. "Go!" Accompanied by this cold voice, the silver flame lightly landed on the water screen. Boom! In an instant, it was as if a spark had fallen into a pot of oil, and a raging fire instantly burned. Above the deep blue water screen, a bright and cold silver flame instantly ignited. It covered the sky and covered the earth. The black-robed man sensed that something was wrong and immediately wanted to retreat. However, at this moment, another water screen rose up behind him. The silver flame quickly spread and burned over. Two burning water screens, one in front and one behind, trapped the black-robed man in the middle. Gradually, the crimson sides that were trapped in the water screen also started to melt. The black-robed man finally panicked. He originally thought that Rong Xiu's realm was suppressed and would definitely not be his match, but he did not expect him to be able to use such a move. "Your Highness, your strength is indeed not to be underestimated. Unfortunately, I came prepared this time." As soon as he finished speaking, the surrounding heaven and earth origin force rapidly surged into his body. The aura around him surged crazily. Soon, Chu Luiwei sensed a ripple in the distant Heaven's Canopy. That man had actually forcefully raised his strength to the peak of rank 6. When it sensed the aura of a rank 7 warrior, Heaven's Canopy would become unstable. He had clearly intentionally stuck his realm at this boundary. Outside the Heaven's Canopy, the highest level one can reach is the peak of the 6th level. "Your Highness, the suppression of your realm is too strong. How can you be a match for me now?" The black-robed man let out a strange laugh, and a white chain suddenly flew out from under his robe. The chain seemed to be made of carved bones, and it emitted a cold aura. If one looked carefully, they would be able to see that it was covered in dried blood. It made people shudder with fear. The chain flew out and pierced into the water screen. The chain was intercepted again, but when the silver flame neared, the dark red blood on the white bones suddenly wriggled. The silver flame licked the chain crazily, but only a series of crackling sounds could be heard. Vaguely, it sounded like the mournful cries of a malicious spirit. A hole was gradually being devoured on the water screen. The last layer of flame was extinguished, and the chain quickly flew toward Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu suddenly looked up. His gaze was deep. He abruptly raised his hand and grabbed the chain tightly. The black-robed man suddenly looked up and laughed. "Ha! Do you think this is still within heaven's canopy? Don't think I don't know that the golden body of the saint cannot be summoned outside heaven's canopy. You must die today." After saying that, he shouted in a deep voice, "Ghost chain, explode!" Bam, bam, bam. The white bones on the chain suddenly exploded. Rong Xiu flung his wrist. The chain shook violently. The powerful force quickly spread to the black-robed man's body. Boom! A terrifying aura spread out in all directions with the two of them as the center. The two of them were sent flying by the impact of the force. Shui Shui roared and flew out quickly. It originally wanted to catch Rong Xiu, but the force was too strong. In addition, it was already injured, so it fell down together with Rong Xiu. Shui Shui's claws scratched a deep trench on the ground, and it finally stopped when it hit the reef. Although Rong Xiu had Shui Shui as a buffer, his arms still hit the reef heavily. On the other hand, although the black-robed man was also affected, it was not as serious as Rong Xiu, and he quickly stabilized himself. The outcome of the two of them was obvious. Rong Xiu's hand was on the rough reef. Just as he was about to turn around, he suddenly realized something and looked up. Behind the reef, in the shadows, there was a pair of clear eyes. It was a face that he couldn't be more familiar with. Why was she here? Before Rong Xiu could think clearly, he felt a cold wind coming from behind. He quickly and resolutely shouted in a low voice, "Dodge!" However, Chu Liwei did not dodge. Instead, her eyes seemed to be burning with flames. When she exchanged glances with Rong Xiu, she clearly saw the bloodstains on Rong Xiu's face and body. Ever since they met, the Rong Xiu she saw was always strong and calm. Even when he was fighting the black flying python, his clothes were always neat and tidy. She had never seen him in such a sorry state. She did not know why, but a nameless anger suddenly rose from the bottom of her heart. In midair, the blood-red sharp blade flew over and was about to land on Rong Xiu's body. Chu Liwei didn't even think as she jumped and flipped over from behind the reef. Immediately, she pulled Rong Xiu away. At this moment, the blood-red sharp blade had arrived. It was close at hand. She could already clearly feel the terrifying pressure. She grabbed Rong Xiu's hand tightly and with a turn of her feet, she blocked in front of Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu immediately guessed what she was planning to do and his heart suddenly tightened. With her current strength, how could she withstand this attack? A woo! Dumpling suddenly flew out and went straight for the blood-red blade. Its small body was overturned in a blink of an eye. The strength of a 6th-stage peak warrior was extremely terrifying and it was not something it could handle. On the other side, Shui Shui struggled to stand up, but with a few more wounds on its body, it could not get up at all. Chu Liwei suddenly pushed Rong Xiu away. Rong Xiu's heart was empty and in the next moment, he pulled her tightly into his arms. Chu Liwei suddenly bumped into his chest and the tip of her nose hurt. But at this moment, she did not care about this and the first sentence that came out of her mouth was, "Danger!" Digression, Kavenka is in so much pain that he wishes he was dead. The remaining 2 updates will probably be released in the afternoon. Kavenka is so unbearable. Mobile users, please browse and read. Chapter 238. Rong Xiu held her tightly in his arms. When he heard her voice, he suddenly froze. She actually told him to run first? Did she know what she meant by doing this? Seeing that Rong Xiu didn't move, Chu Luiwei anxiously shouted again. Hurry! This shout woke Rong Xiu up from his dream. He looked at the girl in his arms. She was slender, young, but brave and fearless. At this moment, his figure was finally clearly reflected in her eyes. He heard his heart beating rapidly, and even the blood in his limbs and bones surged. Deep in his heart, it was as if thousands of joy were surging up one after another, drowning him. Chu Luiwei already felt the imminent danger behind her. Her hair stood on end. She wanted to push Rong Xiu away, but he hugged her so tightly that she couldn't break free. This person, he was usually a strategist who could decide victory from 1,000 miles away. Why was he suddenly stunned at this moment? Rong Xiu, do you really want to die here? Chu Luiwei asked through gritted teeth. Rong Xiu's eyes were so deep that one couldn't see the bottom. It was like a whirlpool that wanted to swallow her. His thin lips lifted slightly, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Of course not. It wasn't easy to wait for this day. How could he die? He looked deeply at Chu Luiwei, and an undercurrent surged. Chu Luiwei didn't know how to describe his gaze, and the words that were about to come out of her mouth suddenly couldn't come out. The next moment, he lowered his gaze and his gaze fell on Chu Luiwei's slender and fair neck. She had tied the colored glass barrier around her neck. With a light hook of his finger, the colored glass barrier fell into his palm. He circulated his force, and the colored glass barrier instantly unfolded. The barrier glowing with a faint silver color immediately enveloped the two of them. Boom! The powerful force rushed over and crashed into the colored glass barrier. The colored glass barrier suddenly trembled. However, in the end, he still managed to isolate that ball of energy. Chu Luiwei was slightly shocked. Looks like this glazed barrier that Rong Xiu gave her wasn't ordinary either, to actually be able to forcefully withstand the attack of a peak Tier 6 powerhouse. Is it a woman? The black-robed man stood in the air and looked down at the two of them. To be precise, he was looking at Chu Luiwei. Although she was tightly held in Rong Xiu's arms and her face could not be seen, one could still tell that she was a young girl with a graceful figure. After a brief moment of dead silence, he suddenly laughed out loud. Ha! So that was how it was. So that was how it was. No wonder the Saint Prince was willing to stay outside heaven's canopy for such a long time. It was all because of a woman. Rumor has it that His Highness, the Holy Sun, does not get close to women and is proud and aloof. Who would have thought that he would actually lose his head over a woman? If this news were to spread, it would probably cause a huge commotion. Chu Luiwei was even more confused. Why did these words sound so strange? Could it be that Rong Xiu had always been inside heaven's canopy? How could this be? Close your eyes. Rong Xiu lowered his head and gently kissed her eyes. His voice was low and gentle. Chu Luiwei did not know why, but she obediently closed her eyes and leaned into his arms. The moment he opened his mouth, that terrifying threat seemed to quietly dissipate. It was as if as long as he was around, all the dangers were not worth mentioning. She did not know where this inexplicable peace of mind came from, but she seemed to be very used to it. Seeing that she was obediently lying in his arms, Rong Xiu's eyes flashed with a dark light, and his arms tightened. Then he finally looked at the black-robed man. A faint golden light appeared in his eyes that were as deep as the night. The black-robed man's laughter suddenly stopped. Just now, Rong Xiu raised his hand and lightly pointed forward. A dazzling golden flame suddenly appeared at his fingertip. The saint's golden body. How could this be? This is outside heaven's canopy, Qi. Rong Xiu flicked his finger, and that golden flame instantly flew out. It was just a small ball, but in the eyes of the black-robed man, it was like a life-taking talisman. He retreated in fear and used all his speed, hoping to get away as soon as possible. How could this be? How could this be? Outside heaven's canopy, the realm of cultivators would be suppressed to below stage 7 warriors. Logically speaking, it was absolutely impossible for him to summon the saint's golden body. But now, Rong Xiu's aura was indeed much stronger than before. Even though he had already used all his strength to escape, the golden flame's speed was even faster. Not long later, it silently landed on the dark blue sea surface. The moment that golden flame touched the sea surface, everything in the surroundings seemed to have stopped. The waves of the sea suddenly stopped, and the waves hit the reef. Even the two water curtains burning with silver flames froze. The black-robed man only felt as if there was a mountain pressing down on him. His legs felt as if they were filled with lead, and he started to find it difficult to move. This was the pressure of an absolute powerhouse. He turned around in a panic and saw Rong Xiu standing by the shore, hugging the woman in his arms tightly and looking at him coldly and disdainfully. That gaze was as if he was looking at an ant that was about to die. Cold. Indifferent. No one dared to have the slightest intention of disobedience. The next moment, Rong Xiu's lips moved slightly. With that, the place where the golden flame was suddenly collapsed, revealing a piece of darkness in the void. That was the collapse of space. The black-robed man was horrified. He couldn't care about anything else and turned to run. But his body didn't seem to have any reaction. He looked down in shock and realized that his entire body was also frozen by that terrifying power, and he couldn't move at all. And at this moment, with the golden flame as the center, the surrounding space started to collapse. The black void expanded as if it was forming a huge black hole. Seawater, waves, flames, everything was swallowed into that collapsing space. Soon, that black color had spread to the black-robed man's feet. No. He screamed in horror and frantically tried to move his body, but it was futile. In the end, he could only watch as his feet disappeared along with the collapse of space. Everything happened so quickly that he didn't even feel the pain. The collapsing space had already swallowed his thighs. Only when his waist was also crushed did the bone-piercing pain finally come. The mournful screams sounded particularly eerie in the empty sea. He looked at Rong Xiu with hatred and said sternly, "Saint," forcefully summoning the golden body outside heaven's canopy. "Aren't you afraid of being punished?" Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes. Noises. The speed of the collapsing space became even faster. Before the black-robed man could finish his sentence, his entire body was swallowed. If Chu Luiyue looked back at this moment, he would see that more than half of the space between the sea and the sky had already collapsed. The huge black void strangely and quietly appeared there. It was hard to imagine what kind of person could have such a powerful means. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 239. Rong Xiu withdrew the golden flame, and the black void began to gradually recover. When everything returned to normal, the golden light in Rong Xiu's eyes finally dissipated, and the deep gaze returned. Immediately, he gently patted Chu Luiyue's back. "All right." Chu Luiyue slowly raised her head and glanced at him. Rong Xiu looked no different from before. But she faintly felt that the Rong Xiu here seemed to be different from the one she saw before. She wondered if it was because of the so-called Holy Sun identity. Suppressing the doubts in her heart, she turned back to take a look. The magnificent sea had returned to its calm state. The two burning water curtains from before had completely dissipated and disappeared without a trace. And the man in the black robe had indeed disappeared without a trace. "He's dead." Rong Xiu faintly responded with a as if he didn't care. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly jumped. The man in the black robe was a peak 6th rank warrior. He actually died just like that. And there was no corpse left. How did Rong Xiu do it? Although she was leaning in Rong Xiu's arms just now and didn't see anything, she could still hear the movements and sounds clearly. She could roughly guess what had happened. But she really couldn't imagine how Rong Xiu killed the man in the black robe. He had been standing here holding her and didn't even move a step. She had too many questions in her heart, but when the words reached her mouth, she suddenly couldn't speak. Rong Xiu suddenly took out a white handkerchief and carefully wiped the blood off his hands. Chu Luiyue glanced at it. It was the one he lent her the last time. The two of them suddenly fell into silence. Chu Luiyue then realized that her hands were still tightly clutching the front of his clothes, and her whole body was tightly in his arms. An ambiguous and subtle aura gradually spread out. Now that she had calmed down, she came back to her senses and gradually remembered what she had done. Instantly, he was dumbfounded. Did she just jump out for Rongxiu? At that time, she didn't even seem to care about her own life. She just did it so straightforwardly. Her fingers curled up slightly, not knowing if she should retreat first. Being so close to Rongxiu made her face burn. "What are you thinking about?" asked Rongxiu casually as he glanced down and guessed her thoughts. "I think you and I, it seems strange," Chu Luiwei blurted out, but she immediately stopped mid-sentence. No matter how he phrased it, it didn't seem right. Rongxiu chuckled and put away the handkerchief. After making sure that there was no blood on his hands, he finally nodded in satisfaction and looked at her. "Me and you? What's wrong?" Chu Luiwei coughed and pushed him, but realized that she couldn't push him away. She could only give up. "Nothing, I was just thinking, what did that person mean when he said that you would be punished for summoning the golden body of the son of Saint outside heaven's canopy?" Rongxiu paused and suddenly reached out to hold her face. Chu Luiwei could only look up and meet his eyes. "Coincidentally, I also want to ask a question. When we were in danger just now, you stood in front of me and let me go first. What do you mean by that?" His tone was gentle and slow, but his eyes were deep and serious. Chu Luiwei was instantly embarrassed. In fact, she also didn't know why she did that. She had a vague guess in her heart, but she couldn't say it out loud. "You haven't answered my question. As long as you tell me the answer to this question, I will tell you everything you want to know." Rongxiu. Chu Luiwei stared at him. He was obviously doing it on purpose. Rongxiu looked at her embarrassed face and really loved it. He inched closer. The two of them were so close that they could hear each other's breathing. He chuckled. "Actually, I have an answer, but I don't know if it's right. Why don't I tell you, and you just have to say if it's right or not? How about it?" Chu Luiwei blinked in a daze and saw that his eyes had suddenly become exceptionally dark. Her heart suddenly skipped a beat. Immediately, his fingers slid down from her cheeks and pinched her chin, forcing her to raise her face slightly. He lowered his head and moved closer. Chu Luiwei only felt something soft and slightly cold on her lips. That familiar cold fragrance suddenly became rich, and in an instant, it permeated between his lips and teeth. Chu Luiwei widened her eyes, and her heart felt as if it had been heavily rubbed by something. It was unbelievably sweet and soft. Rongxiu was kissing her. The sea breeze was gentle, and the moonlight was bright. She could even see the faint shadows cast by his thick eyelashes on his eyelids. Rongxiu originally wanted to kiss her lightly, but the moment he touched that incredible softness, he felt as if something in his heart had suddenly collapsed. Almost instinctively, he bit her lips, grinding and sucking on them. A blazing heat spread from between their lips. Chu Luiwei felt as if her whole body was burning, and her limbs were a little weak. She finally found her reason and pushed Rongxiu. However, she was no match for Rongxiu. At this time, her limbs were even weaker, and her two pushes were like scratching an itch. Not only did she not push Rongxiu away, but she also gently tickled his heart, making him more restless. His arm wrapped around her slim waist, and she was almost embedded into his body. Chu Luiwei spat out a few vague syllables between her lips and teeth. Rongxiu then slightly let go of her and looked at her with a deep gaze. "What do you think of this answer?" As soon as he spoke, Chu Luiwei realized that his voice was very hoarse, as if he was restraining something. Her face turned even redder, and she glared at him. He was still as shameless as ever. Little did she know that at this time, her eyes were watery from the kiss, and her face was like a peach blossom. This glare made half of Rongxiu's body go limp. The other half was the exact opposite. He gently rubbed his fingers on her cheeks, and with an ambiguous burning sensation, he murmured in a low voice, "It seems wrong." "Then, what about this?" As soon as he finished speaking, he lowered his head and kissed her lips again. This time, his movements were very fast. Before she could react, he had already attacked her. Chu Luiwei was ashamed and angry. In a fit of anger, She simply started to counterattack. She released her hands that were originally holding onto his chest and reached up, hooking them around his neck and pressing her whole body closer. At the same time, she imitated him and bit his lips, gently licking them. Rong Xiu's body stiffened. Did she know what she was doing? Chu Luiwei felt that he suddenly stopped, and she was even more unconvinced, so she went in a little further. The two of them touched, lingering in the air. Rong Xiu sucked in a breath of cold air. Digression. Congratulations on picking up a broken February mobile phone. User, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 240. I have to stop. Rong Xiu thought to himself. Otherwise, he really couldn't tell what he would do. However, she was so sweet and soft that he couldn't control himself. He had been waiting for this day for too long. One time, another time. Rong Xiu's hand held her waist tightly. She could feel that he was suppressing something through her clothes. The girl in his arms gradually softened into a ball, as if he could knead her however he wanted. She belonged to him. She belonged only to him. Chu Luiwei gradually felt that Rong Xiu's aura was becoming a little dangerous. She instinctively felt that it wasn't good to continue like this. Finally, she took the initiative to step back. She tilted her head and leaned against his shoulder. Rong Xiu's hand rubbed her waist a few times. It was a little itchy. He took a deep breath and finally suppressed the impulse in his heart. His voice was terrifyingly hoarse. If you do this again next time, Chu Luiwei blinked and deliberately asked, if you do this again next time, what will you do? Rong Xiu looked at her meaningfully. There seemed to be sparks in his eyes that would burn at any time. Of course, you're welcome. Chu Luiwei was speechless. As expected, it wasn't a wise choice to be thick-skinned with someone. However, seeing Rong Xiu like this, she didn't dare to continue teasing him deliberately. She quietly held his hand. Rong Xiu rubbed his chin against the soft hair on the top of her head. Then he looked into her eyes and said seriously, "You haven't said whether this answer is right or not." His eyes were calm, but there was a hint of nervousness in his voice. Chu Luiwei never thought that someone as powerful as Rong Xiu would feel nervous. He was waiting for her answer. How important was it in his heart that he would be so careful and cautious when asking for an answer? Chu Luiwei stared at him. Many scenes flashed through her mind. She was stunned when she first saw him by the lake. She was surprised when she saw him again at the palace banquet. She was moved at Wanling Mountain. Scenes flashed by one after another, and in the end, they all disappeared. All that was left was the face of the evildoer before him, which became increasingly clear. In fact, she had always treated Rong Xiu differently, but she was unwilling to admit it for various reasons. But now that he thought about it, those were just some unimportant reasons. Even if she had a heart-wrenching past, that was all in her previous life. Now, there was someone who was willing to embrace her new life and give her bright and warm expectations. She stood on her tiptoes and planted a light kiss on his lips. Rong Xiu's pupils shrank, but there were thousands of fireworks in his eyes. Rong Xiu. She looked up at him and said in the same serious tone, "For me, there is only one question and one answer in my life. There's no betrayal and no regret. Do you understand?" Her voice was very calm, but there were too many emotions in her eyes. Those unbearable past were her eternal scars. She definitely couldn't bear a second betrayal. Rong Xiu's heart seemed to be clenched by something and it hurt. After a moment, his thin lips lifted slightly and he chuckled, "What a coincidence, so do I." He held her hand tightly and looked into her eyes. "When we go back, I'll go to your residence to propose marriage." Chu Luiwei was stunned and asked subconsciously, "So soon?" Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. "Is it very soon? But I've been waiting for a long time." As long as he didn't kidnap her back, he wouldn't be able to sleep well. Chu Luiwei wanted to say something, but when she looked up and saw his expression, her heart suddenly moved. For some reason, she always seemed to be exceptionally easy to talk to when facing Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu didn't dare to touch her again, for fear that he couldn't control himself, so he could only settle for the second best and kiss her forehead. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly stopped and leaned on Chu Liyue's shoulder. Chu Liyue glanced sideways and realized that Rong Xiu's face was exceptionally pale. He seemed to have fainted. Rong Xiu. On the fourth day of the Qing Jiao competition, the first 3 days of the warrior competition had finally ended. The Xian Master students from the 3 academies were all eager to get a good ranking in the Xian Master competition today. Unlike the one-on-one competition a few days ago, the Xian Master competition was held together by everyone. The huge arena had been evenly divided into squares. A chessboard was placed in each square. There were 5 Xian formations on each chessboard. Whoever could solve these 5 Xian formations the fastest would be first. At a glance, many people were already in position, waiting for the competition to start. However, there was some commotion on Tianlu Academy's side. Lu Yu isn't here yet? Bai Qin asked with a frown. Mu Hongyu shook her head. She was also rather anxious. When we went to look for her this morning, she wasn't at her residence. We thought she was here first, but we didn't expect her to be here either. I already asked Xin to go back and look for her. As she spoke, she turned to look at the entrance and saw Xin panting as he returned. However, Chu Liyue wasn't behind him. Mu Hongyu's heart sank, but she still walked forward quickly and asked, "Where's Lu Yu? Did you find her?" Xin placed one hand on his knee and panted heavily as he waved his hand repeatedly. "No. I looked everywhere, but I didn't see her." Mu Hongyu was silent for a moment before she suddenly thought of something. "What about Juyo Tower? Did you look for her there? She usually likes to go there to cultivate. Did she forget to come out?" Xin shook his head. "I already asked. She didn't go there yesterday or today." Bai Chen thought for a while and muttered uncertainly. Could it be that she was too tired yesterday, so she went home? Si Yang couldn't help but interject. That shouldn't be the case. She said yesterday that she would definitely participate in today's Xian Master competition. Why did she suddenly not participate? Even if she used up a lot of energy in yesterday's competition, Chu Liyue's talent and ability as a Xian Master were extremely outstanding. As long as she participated in the competition, her results wouldn't be bad. Why did she suddenly disappear? Students who haven't gone up yet, please hurry up. The competition is about to start. The referee shouted from afar. Sun Zhongyan walked over. Lu Yu isn't here yet? The few of them looked at each other and shook their heads. Sun Zhongyan felt a little uneasy. He remembered that Chu Liyue had indeed returned to the academy yesterday, but why was she missing now? From yesterday until today, he didn't notice anything strange in the academy. If Chu Liyue had gone out and entered the academy, the teachers in charge of guarding the entrance would definitely know. But now, did something really happen? After all, she had offended many people in the past few days. However, this was the Imperial City, and the Qing Jiao competition was being held. No one would be so stupid as to make a move on Chu Liyue at this time. Sun Zhongyan thought for a while and said, "Don't worry about the Xian Master competition. Don't worry about the Xian Master competition for now. The most important thing right now is to find the person. Bai Chen, bring some people to the academy to look for her again. Also, send some people to the Imperial City to gather information and see if they can find any traces. Also, inform Lord Chu Ning." Digression. Today's February was a useless February. It could only update 2 chapters at 9 p.m., and the rest would probably be updated before 3 p.m. Chapter 241. Chu Liyue naturally didn't know that everyone was frantically searching for her in the capital. She only cared about Rong Xiu now. After Rong Xiu fainted, she took his pulse and found that the situation in his body was very strange. She actually couldn't detect Rong Xiu's Yuan meridian. After trying twice, she could only vaguely feel that there seemed to be 2 forces colliding in Rong Xiu's body. She couldn't sense anything else. Chu Liyue guessed that Rong Xiu's coma should be related to forcefully summoning the so-called Holy Sun's golden body. It was impossible to forcefully raise one's strength to a stage 7 warrior outside heaven's canopy. It was just that she had never heard of anyone who could do this before, so she didn't know what was going on. She carefully let Rong Xiu lean on a relatively flat reef. Looking at his pale face, she felt a little anxious. Xue Xue walked over from the side and rubbed against her leg, whimpering softly. Chu Luiwei glanced at it. "You're saying that he's fine?" Xue Xue nodded and secretly gave its master a look of disdain. Its master was so powerful that this little bit of trouble was really nothing. If Chu Luiwei didn't come, he could still go back. But since she was here, and the two of them happened to be engaged, it was normal for him to take advantage of this opportunity to play the trick of injuring himself. Xue Xue simply lay down. Anyway, that man from the unparalleled palace was already dead. It wouldn't be too late to go back after its master recovered. Seeing Xue Xue's attitude, Chu Luiwei felt a little relieved. Since Xue Xue felt that Rong Xiu was fine, then there was no need to worry too much. She half-hugged Rong Xiu and leaned on the reef quietly, waiting for him to wake up. Dumpling finally woke up and climbed onto her shoulder again, rubbing against her face pitifully. Chu Luiwei glanced at it. Dumpling was indeed not injured. Somehow, its resistance to beatings seemed to be getting stronger and stronger. The sea breeze at night was a little salty, and the moonlight shone on the surface of the sea. The surroundings were barren. But Chu Luiwei didn't feel lonely. On the contrary, this was a rare peaceful night since her rebirth. She lowered her eyes and looked at Rong Xiu, her gaze lingering on his face. In fact, there was one thing that she didn't tell Rong Xiu just now. When he summoned the golden body of the saint, his entire person became different. Cold, indifferent high up above. She had never seen such a Rong before. But she faintly felt a little familiar. She didn't know where this familiarity came from. She was certain that she had never seen him before. As long as she had, she would definitely remembers. Teet, estis she, but when she was facing Rong Xiu, she always felt an inexplicable sense of security. "Have we met before?" Chu Luiwei muttered softly. Then she felt that her thought was a little ridiculous, so she smiled and closed her eyes. Her voice was very soft, and it dissipated in the night wind. But she didn't see Rong Xiu's eyelashes trembling slightly. At the Qingjiao competition, Chu Luiwei was indeed missing. Sun Zhongyan still had to take care of the Qingjiao competition, so he handed this matter to Bai Chen and the rest. Although they were also very anxious, they couldn't make it public now. Even when he went to look for Chu Ning, he did it secretly. Chu Ning wanted to use the Imperial Guards, but he gave up after thinking about it. He only asked a few of his trusted subordinates to secretly ask around in the capital. He even personally went to the Zhenbao Pavilion. Jianghu was also surprised when he heard that Chu Luiwei was missing, and he agreed to help without hesitation. Chu Ning was just trying his luck, but he didn't expect Jianghu to be so willing to help. He was both grateful and confused. The Zhenbao Pavilion had an extraordinary status, and Jianghu was even more so as the second in charge. But he seemed to be very concerned about you. Whether it was the previous time when he booked the entire Phoenix restaurant or this time, it was not something that an ordinary friendship could do. He tried to ask, but Jianghu only smiled and said that he got along well with Chu Luiwei. Now that she was the champion of the Qingjiao competition, her future was limitless. So it was normal for him to want to get along with her. Chu Ning vaguely felt that something was wrong. Being the champion of the Qingjiao competition was not bad, but it didn't seem to be worth the Zhenbao Pavilion's effort. But looking at Jianghu, he knew that he wouldn't be able to get anything out of him, so he didn't continue asking. He only hoped to find you as soon as possible. After Chu Ning left, the smile on Ji's face immediately disappeared, and he quickly ordered his subordinates to take action. Master wasn't in the capital, but Madam was missing. What was going on? If Master came back and found out that he didn't take good care of Madam, wait. Jianghu suddenly thought of something and was stunned. Master was gone, and Madam was missing. Could it be Ji's heart was on fire, but he didn't dare to leave the capital? Without Master's permission, no one was allowed to go to that place. He wanted to ask Qing and the others, but he was afraid that he would be discovered. After thinking for a long time, he could only pray that Master was with Madam. After a few hours, the sky was bright, and Chu Luiwei opened her eyes. She moved and realized that she had unknowingly laid in Rongxiu's arms. His black cloak was still covering her body. Rongxiu? When did you wake up? Chu Luiwei rubbed her eyes and asked. At the same time, she felt embarrassed. She had planned to guard Rongxiu, but she didn't expect that she would fall asleep and didn't even know that he had woken up. With a smile on his lips, Rongxiu easily carried her up. Chu Luiwei exclaimed and hugged his neck instinctively. It seemed that Rongxiu had recovered. I just woke up too, Rongxiu said. Chu Luiwei didn't believe him, but she didn't ask for details. Rongxiu kissed her. We should go back. Chu Luiwei asked uncertainly, have you recovered? After experiencing such a fierce and dangerous fight yesterday, and then suddenly fainted, she was still worried. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows. Whether it's good or not, you'll know when we get married. Of course, you have to check now. Although this place isn't very good, it's not impossible. Chu Luiwei narrowed her eyes and put her arms around his neck. She moved closer and said with a smile, Really? Do you still want yesterday? With a soft and warm body in his arms, yesterday's scenes came back to his mind. He tightened his arms slightly, suppressed the restlessness in his heart, and glanced at her warningly. This little thing was as bad as always. Rongxiu felt that he had the potential to be a saint since he could endure to this point. He chuckled and turned the tables. You probably don't know, but Prince Li's mansion has prepared everything for the wedding. We can get married immediately after the marriage proposal. Digression, the remaining updates are being filled. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.